I always believed Christmas was a time when families tried a little harder to be kind to each other. You know, the kind of evening where old grudges sit quietly in the corner while laughter takes their place at the table. That's what I told myself, at least when my daughter-in-law walked into my living room that afternoon, wearing a tight smile that didn't match her eyes. I've lived long enough to recognize when someone comes with news they've rehearsed in front of the mirror. She sat on the edge of the couch, crossing her legs like she was in a hurry to leave, and I could already feel my stomach tightening. I offered her coffee, out of habit and out of respect, because that's how I was raised. She accepted, but barely touched the cup. Instead, she cleared her throat and announced that she and my son had been invited to spend Christmas Eve with some close friends. The way she emphasized close friends made it sound like I didn't belong anywhere near that circle. Then came the real blow, wrapped in false politeness. She said that if I wanted, I could meet them there later. But she wasn't sure there would be room in the car because her friends might be bringing big gifts, and there's only so much space, you know. I watched her eyes as she said it, and there was not a single trace of concern. I wasn't being considered. I was being pushed aside like an old chair that no longer fits the decor. My heart sank, but my face didn't show it. I learned a long time ago that dignity is sometimes the only coat we have left to keep us warm. What hurt the most wasn't even her tone. It was my son standing behind her, silent. He leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, eyes staring somewhere near the floor as if he had accidentally walked into a scene he didn't want to be part of. But he stayed. He didn't interrupt. He didn't correct her. The same boy whose fever I watched through the night, whose hand I held at every vaccination, now couldn't lift a finger to protect me from humiliation. That kind of silence cuts deeper than any shouted insult. She extended that so-called invitation like someone tossing scraps to a dog, just enough to pretend she'd been kind. "We'll let you know," she added, already gathering her purse, "depending on how things go." Every word was carefully chosen to remind me of my place, on the outside, looking in. I nodded slowly, pretending not to notice the disdain dripping between her syllables. "Thank you for thinking of me," I replied, my voice calm, even though my chest felt tight. Some battles are not fought out loud. But as she stood up to leave, fully convinced she had handled everything perfectly, I noticed something else. Beneath the arrogance and the fake smile, there was a spark of something different in her eyes. Not just annoyance, not just contempt. It looked strangely like fear. It flashed for a second when our eyes met, and then she looked away quickly, like someone afraid of being read too deeply. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just about Christmas. There was something else going on. I watched them walk out of my house, my son trailing behind like a shadow that had forgotten it once belonged to me. The door closed, and for a few seconds, the silence felt heavier than usual. I knew I was being excluded, maybe even mocked, but I also knew something they didn't. I've spent my whole life paying attention to details other people ignore. And that tiny flicker of fear in her gaze? That told me there was a secret in this Christmas plan, and whether they liked it or not, I was going to find out what it was. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. Something in my chest felt unsettled, like a small knot tightening itself with every breath. I tried to distract my mind by preparing breakfast, but even the familiar smell of cinnamon and coffee couldn't quiet the sense that something was unfolding just out of sight. I had lived enough years to recognize when people were planning something and hoping I wouldn't notice. And my daughter-in-law, despite sua arrogancia polished manners, never realized I could read her as easily as a handwritten letter. As I stepped outside to water the plants on the porch, I heard giggles and hurried footsteps near my driveway. My hearing may not be what it once was, but I know the sound of mockery when I hear it. Peeking through the side of the house, I spotted my daughter-in-law and two of her friends standing by their cars. They were pointing at my home, laughing as if it were the punchline of some private joke. My name was whispered, not gently, not respectfully, but like something to be ridiculed. My heart tightened, and for a moment, I felt like a child again, standing alone while the others whispered in the schoolyard. One of the women glanced toward my window and whispered something that made all of them burst into laughter. My daughter-in-law placed her hands on her hips in that dramatic, exaggerated way she does when she wants to look superior. She spoke loudly, almost as if she wanted me to hear, saying she couldn't believe I still thought I'd be joining them for Christmas. My cheeks burned, not from shame. I've survived too much in life to be ashamed of my existence, but from the cruelty that seemed so casual. Cruelty that had become fashionable to them. I watched them load large bags into their trunks, decorated with shiny wrapping paper and name tags for everyone except me. The sight stung more than I expected. Not because of the gifts. I've never been materialistic, but because it became painfully obvious that their Christmas gathering had been planned for a while, and I had been purposely left out of every detail. Every laugh, every whisper, every dismissive gesture carved a deeper wound. Yet I didn't cry. I refused to give them that victory. When they finally drove away, I found myself gripping the porch railing a little too tightly. The winter wind brushed against my face, cooling a tear that had escaped without my permission. I took a deep breath and whispered to myself, "You faced worse, Evelyn." I forced a small smile. Age teaches us resilience, even when the world tries to make us invisible. I straightened up, wiped my face, and walked back inside. If they thought they could break me with childish cruelty, they still had much to learn. But what I didn't expect was what happened next. Just as I closed the door, my phone buzzed on the kitchen table. A message popped up from an unknown number. The text was short, only 5 words, but it froze me where I stood. "You shouldn't trust them. Tonight." My hands trembled. Someone out there knew something, and suddenly, this Christmas joke felt like the beginning of something much darker. I stared at the message on my phone for a long moment, trying to steady my breathing. At my age, surprises rarely come in pleasant forms, and those 5 words felt like a cold finger running down my spine. I sat at the kitchen table, the sunlight barely reaching across the room, and wondered who could have sent it. No name, no picture, no previous conversation. Just a warning, direct, urgent, and unsettling. I felt my heart thump harder than usual, as if urging me to pay attention. My first instinct was to call my son. But what would I say? That some stranger had warned me about his wife. He would dismiss it instantly, defend her, and accuse me of imagining things, like he had done so many times before when she twisted situations in her favor. Over the years, I learned that silence can be a shield. Rather than call him, I placed the phone down and decided to observe. If someone took the risk to warn me, there must be a reason, and I intended to find it. I read the message again and felt a tugging sensation in my chest. What were they planning tonight? Why would I be the one who shouldn't trust them? And most importantly, who would care enough about me to send a warning anonymously? I walked to the living room and sank into my old armchair, the one where I had rocked my son to sleep. The memories washed over me like a bittersweet tide, and for a brief moment, I wondered where things had gone so terribly wrong between us. Just as I closed my eyes, trying to calm the storm inside me, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't the mysterious number, it was a group photo my daughter-in-law posted online. She and her friends were laughing in a cafe, clinking holiday drinks, clearly celebrating without me. The caption read, "Preparing for the perfect night, Christmas tree sparkles. Preparing the perfect night." My stomach tightened. Perfect for whom? I zoomed into the picture and noticed something strange, a wrapped box on the table with my name written on it. Why would they prepare a gift for someone they planned to ditch? A wave of unease washed over me. The box was small, carefully wrapped, and placed in front of one of the friends as if it needed to stay in sight. My mind raced. Was it a genuine gift? Or part of a prank? My daughter-in-law loved theatrics, and humiliation disguised as kindness was her specialty. I leaned back in the chair and pressed my hand against my chest. The warning message felt heavier now, as though it had been sent at the exact moment I needed to notice that detail. I turned off my phone and looked around my quiet house. For years, I believed loneliness was just an echo of old memories. But today it felt different, like someone was intentionally pushing me toward it. I stood up slowly and walked toward the window, watching the empty street outside. A sense of resolve rose within me, quiet but firm. If something was being planned for tonight, I wouldn't be caught off guard. I had spent my entire life surviving storms stronger than this. And whether they liked it or not, I was going to uncover the truth behind their perfect night. As the afternoon dragged on, the uneasy feeling in my chest only grew heavier. I tried knitting, reading, even listening to one of my old Christmas CDs, but nothing distracted me from the message I had received. When the sun began to set, casting long shadows across my living room, I decided to step outside for some fresh air. The cold breeze hit my face like a gentle slap, waking me from the fog of worry. But as I reached the porch, something caught my eye. A black car parked across the street, engine running, lights off. At first, I thought it belonged to one of the neighbors. But the car didn't move. It didn't turn on its headlights. It just sat there, idling quietly, as if waiting for something or someone. My heart thudded in my ears as I narrowed my eyes, trying to see inside. The windows were tinted, hiding whoever was behind the wheel. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand straight. Cars don't sit running in the cold unless there's a purpose. And my instincts were rarely wrong. I wrapped my shawl tighter around my shoulders and took a step toward the edge of the porch. Immediately, the car's headlights flashed once, not turning on fully, just a single, sharp blink. My breath caught. Was that a signal? Was someone acknowledging my presence? For a moment, I wondered if it was connected to the message. Maybe the sender wanted me to know they were watching. Or maybe it wasn't a friend at all. Maybe this was part of whatever my daughter-in-law had planned for tonight. I retreated a step, gripping the wooden railing for support. Every possible scenario flooded my mind, some ridiculous, others terrifyingly plausible. What if they wanted to take me somewhere without my consent? What if the joke was darker than I imagined? I knew my daughter-in-law disliked me, but would she go this far? My breath fogged in the air as panic crawled up my spine. I felt like prey being observed from the shadows. Then, almost too perfectly timed, my phone buzzed again. A second message from the unknown number. Stay inside. Do not open the door for anyone. My legs weakened as I read it. This wasn't coincidence. Someone knew the car was there. Someone was watching more closely than I realized. I glanced back toward the street. The car was still there, silent, unmoving. The warning felt more urgent than ever. I stepped back into my house and locked the door, double-checking each window as I went. The house suddenly felt too big, too quiet, each creak of the floor echoing like a threat. I sat on the couch, gripping my phone, trying to control my shaking hands. It was becoming clear that tonight was not just about being left behind on Christmas. Something else was in motion, something deliberate, hidden, and dangerous. And I wasn't sure if the stranger texting me was my protector or just another player in a game I hadn't agreed to join. I sat on the couch with the phone clutched in my hand, trying to steady my breathing. The house felt colder than before, as if the walls themselves knew something was approaching. I considered calling the police, but what would I even say? A mysterious car is parked outside, and someone I don't know told me to stay inside. They would dismiss me as paranoid, an elderly woman overthinking a harmless coincidence. I took a shaky sip of lukewarm tea and tried to collect my thoughts. Then my phone buzzed again, but this time it wasn't the unknown number. It was my son. My heart skipped. I hesitated before answering because dread washed over me. He rarely called without his wife hovering nearby, monitoring every word. When I picked up, his voice sounded strange, rushed, distracted, and almost nervous. "Mom, you're staying home tonight, right?" he asked, as if confirming something rehearsed. I swallowed hard, sensing his unease. His voice trembled in a way he didn't intend to reveal. I asked him why he was asking, but he didn't answer directly. Instead, he said, "It's just better for everyone if you don't go anywhere. Trust me." His words felt wrong, twisted by pressure or fear. I could hear muffled voices behind him, women laughing, the clinking of glasses, and my daughter-in-law saying something I couldn't quite identify. My son's voice lowered. "Just do what she says, okay?" That sentence cut me deeper than any insult. Since when did my son take orders to keep me isolated? Before I could respond, I heard a sharp sound, like the phone being snatched from his hand, followed by my daughter-in-law's voice snapping. She doesn't need to know anything. Just hang up. The call ended abruptly. I stared at the screen, heart pounding in my ears. Something was very wrong. This wasn't just a group of rude young women planning to ditch me. There was tension, secrecy, and panic on their end that didn't make sense. If their plan was harmless, why hide it? Why silence him? My hands trembled as I set the phone down. I had a sudden flashback of my son as a little boy, running into my arms, trusting me with every scraped knee and every fear. But tonight, he felt like a stranger caught in something bigger than himself. For the first time, a thought struck me with terrifying clarity. Maybe he wasn't just being manipulated, maybe he was being threatened or coerced into something he didn't understand. And maybe, just maybe, the joke wasn't meant for me. It was meant to protect someone else. I paced the living room, my footsteps echoing on the wooden floor. The black car was still outside, like a predator waiting for the exact moment to pounce. The warning messages, the abrupt phone call, the secrecy, it all formed a puzzle with too many missing pieces. One thing was clear, tonight was no ordinary Christmas Eve. Something sinister was unfolding, and for the first time, I wasn't sure if the danger was outside my door or within the people I loved. After that call, I couldn't sit still. I paced from one end of the living room to the other, my heart hammering with each step. The house felt alive with tension, as if the air itself had thickened. My eyes kept drifting toward the window, where the black car remained parked, silent, patient, almost predatory. I pulled the curtains closed, but it didn't help. I could still feel its presence, like a shadow pressed against the glass. I returned to the kitchen and poured myself a fresh cup of tea, hoping the warmth would soothe the shaking in my hands. As the kettle hissed, my phone buzzed again, this time with a notification from social media. My daughter-in-law had posted another update. Against my better judgment, I opened it. It was a picture of a table covered in Christmas decorations, wine glasses, and gifts. But there, right in the center, was the same small wrapped box I had seen earlier, the one with my name on it. They were showcasing it, as if it were part of their festive fun. Something about the way the box was positioned felt staged. Too perfect. Too intentional. Almost as if they wanted me to see it. My eyes locked onto the gift tag. My name was written in my daughter-in-law's handwriting, sharp, angular, almost carved into the paper. I zoomed in, and a shiver ran through me. The ribbon wasn't tied neatly. It was twisted, rushed, like someone had wrapped it with trembling hands. Why would she be nervous wrapping a gift for me, especially if I wasn't even invited? I stared at that photo for so long my eyes began to blur. And then I noticed something else, a small corner of white paper sticking out from beneath the wrapping, barely visible. Almost like a note. A hidden message. My throat tightened. Was this part of the perfect night they were planning? Or was it something more sinister? My mind raced back to the warning message. You shouldn't trust them. Tonight. Suddenly, the gift didn't feel symbolic. It felt purposeful. A prop. A piece of a plan. I sat down slowly, clutching the phone. Memories of past Christmases flooded my mind. Years when my home was full of life, when my husband was still alive, when my son would run to open presents by the tree. Now, all I had was a wrapped box that seemed to stare back at me through a screen. An object carrying an intention I couldn't decipher. My instincts told me one thing clearly. Whatever was inside wasn't meant to bring me joy. It carried weight. Meaning. Danger, maybe. My phone buzzed again, not with a message this time, but with a call. The unknown number. My breath caught. The screen blinked in the dim light. For a long moment, I just stared at it ringing, as if the sound had frozen time itself. Then, with a trembling finger, I pressed accept. I didn't speak. I just waited. A shaky whisper came through the receiver, barely audible but urgent enough to chill my blood. Don't open that box. Whatever you do, don't let them bring it to your house. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I held the phone so tightly my fingers ached, yet the whisper on the other end was so faint I wondered if I had imagined it. But no, the words were too clear, too deliberate. Don't open that box. My heart thudded so loudly I could barely hear the soft static of the call. I swallowed, fighting the dryness in my throat, and managed to whisper, "Who is this?" But the voice didn't answer immediately. Instead, there was a shallow, shaky breath, someone terrified, someone hiding. Finally, the voice spoke again, trembling like a candle flame in the wind. "They think this is a joke," the stranger murmured. "But it isn't. Not this time." I felt my skin tighten, goosebumps spreading up my arms. The tone wasn't aggressive. It was desperate, like a warning from someone who wasn't supposed to be speaking at all. "Please listen," the voice continued. "You're not safe tonight." My breath hitched. I looked toward the window instinctively, but the curtains remained drawn, shielding me from the darkness outside. I wanted to ask 1,000 questions. Who are you? What's inside the box? What are they planning? But the words tangled in my throat. Instead, I whispered, "Why are you helping me?" There was silence on the line, the kind that stretches too long and reveals more than words. Then the voice replied with a soft, broken truth I didn't expect, "Because I've seen what she's capable of." My stomach twisted. She, my daughter-in-law. The bitterness in the stranger's voice carried history, resentment, and fear. Before I could press further, I heard a sharp sound on the other end, a door slamming, footsteps approaching fast. The voice gasped. "I have to go," they whispered urgently. "Don't let them near you. And don't open." The call cut off abruptly. Silence swallowed the room. I stared at the phone in my hand, my pulse racing. Whoever that person was, they weren't just warning me out of kindness. They were scared for themselves, too. Someone nearby posed a threat, and I couldn't shake the feeling that threat was my daughter-in-law. I set the phone down on the table, my hands trembling uncontrollably now. My mind raced back through every interaction I'd had with my daughter-in-law, every insult disguised as advice, every smirk, every moment she tried to isolate me from my son. Had she ever crossed a line before? Had she done something I didn't know about? The idea that she might be hiding a darker side didn't seem far-fetched anymore. In fact, it felt like a truth I had been too gentle to acknowledge. The house felt smaller, tighter, like the walls were inching closer as the implications of the warning settled in. The box with my name on it, her frantic desire to keep me away, the unknown car watching my home, everything connected into a pattern that chilled my bones. I took a deep breath and whispered to myself, "Evelyn, you survived worse. You'll survive this too." But deep inside, something told me this night would unravel secrets I wasn't prepared to face, secrets that someone, somewhere, was terrified I might discover. After the call ended, the silence in my house felt heavier than ever. Even the ticking of the old clock on the wall sounded louder, sharper, like it was counting down to something I couldn't yet see. I sat perfectly still, listening to the rhythm of my own breathing, trying to calm the tremor in my hands. But no matter how deeply I inhaled, the sense of danger clung to me like cold mist. I felt as if someone somewhere had shifted the world slightly off-center, and I was the only one who noticed. Then, suddenly, a sound cut through the silence, a soft creak on my front porch. My entire body froze. The sound came again, slower this time, heavier. Footsteps. Someone was walking toward my door. I stood up as quietly as I could, my heart pounding so hard I feared it might give me away. I tiptoed toward the hallway, each step painfully slow, and peeked toward the front door. The porch light was off, and through the frosted glass panel, I could only see a dark, blurry silhouette. A knock followed, gentle but deliberate, as if the person wanted to sound polite while knowing exactly what they were doing. My legs trembled. Another knock came, louder this time. I remembered the warning message. "Do not open the door for anyone." My breath caught in my chest. Whoever was outside wasn't trying to surprise me. They were waiting for me to make a mistake. I pressed myself against the wall, holding my breath, praying they wouldn't hear the thudding inside my chest. Then I heard a voice, muffled, but unmistakably familiar. "Evelyn, it's me," my daughter-in-law said. Except her tone wasn't the usual smug, commanding voice she used. It was strangely sweet, almost dripping with forced affection. "We brought your gift early. Open up." My skin crawled. She never used that tone with me. Never. It felt like a costume she was trying on for the first time. And behind her voice, I could hear faint whispers, other voices, likely her friends, trying to hold back laughter. She knocked again, harder. "Come on, Evelyn. We know you're awake." The way she said it sent shivers through me. It wasn't a request. It was a statement of control. I backed away slowly, afraid she might somehow sense my movements. I walked deeper into the hallway, trying to put distance between myself and the door. That's when I heard the doorknob rattle, lightly at first, then more firmly.
Someone was testing it.
Trying to see if it would open. I braced my hand against the wall, fighting the urge to scream. In all my years, I had never felt such pure, icy fear. The voice outside grew sharper. "We won't stay long. Just open the door, so we can drop off your present." Present. The box I was told not to open. A wave of nausea hit me. My instincts screamed one thing. They weren't here to give me something. They were here to make sure I took it. The laughter behind her voice grew louder, more mocking. And in that moment, I knew whatever was happening tonight, I was no longer imagining it. I was in real danger. I stood completely still in the hallway, barely daring to breathe as the doorknob rattled a second time. My daughter-in-law's saccharine voice turned sharper, harder to disguise. "Evelyn, don't be difficult," she said, her tone slipping like a mask cracking under pressure. I could hear the false sweetness dissolving into frustration. Her friends whispered behind her, trying to stifle their laughter. The kind of laughter people use when they believe they're in control. But tonight, I wasn't the one out of control. I was simply silent, and silence, as they would soon discover, is powerful. When I didn't respond, I heard her sigh loudly, dramatically, as she always did when things didn't go exactly her way. "She's probably pretending she's not home," one of the friends muttered, loud enough for me to hear through the door. My pulse raced, but I held my breath. A moment later, another voice chimed in, mocking. "Maybe she fell asleep. Old people do that early, right?" They giggled, delighted with themselves. Their cruelty was childish, but tonight it carried a darker edge that made my stomach tighten. My daughter-in-law knocked again, this time with her knuckles hitting the wood harder. "Evelyn, we brought you something important," she insisted, her voice wobbling with irritation. "Just open the door. We won't stay." The way she emphasized important made my skin crawl. I could almost imagine the small wrapped box in her hand, resting like bait inside a trap. For a moment, I wondered what they expected me to do, laugh along? Thank them? Play the role of the naive old woman they believed I was? Not tonight. Not anymore. Then something changed. The whispers outside grew quieter, tense, confused, no longer amused. One of the friends whispered, "What if she already knows?" Another replied, "She can't. She wouldn't even understand." My daughter-in-law snapped back, annoyed. "Just shut up. She doesn't know anything. She's just stubborn." But her voice trembled, betraying something I hadn't heard before. Fear. Real fear. It wasn't about me refusing the gift. It was about their plans slipping through their fingers. I slowly stepped closer to the door, careful not to make any noise, and I heard footsteps shuffling nervously on the porch. Someone whispered, "We should just leave it and go." Someone else responded, "No, she has to open it. That's the point." My heartbeat quickened. The point? What point? My fingers tightened around the edge of the wall. Whatever was inside that box, whatever they were trying to make me do, they needed me to participate. And the idea that they were desperate for me to take it made the warning messages echo louder in my head. Then the sharp sound of something hitting the ground. A thud. The box. She must have placed it on the doorstep. My daughter-in-law's voice rang out one last time, low and tense. "Fine. If she wants to be ungrateful, that's her choice. But it's done." Their footsteps moved away quickly, no longer laughing, only murmuring in frantic, clipped tones as they hurried to their car. I waited, frozen, until I heard the engine roar and the tires screech down the street. But even after the sound faded, the dread did not. Because now the box, the one I was warned about, sat inches from my doorstep, and the night was far from over. For a long moment, I didn't move. I stood in the hallway staring at the door, knowing that on the other side, just inches away, sat the box with my name on it. The same box the mysterious caller had begged me not to open. The same box my daughter-in-law seemed desperate for me to accept. The air felt thick, almost metallic, as if the house itself was holding its breath with me. I pressed a hand to my chest, feeling the uneven rhythm of my heartbeat. Every instinct inside me screamed that whatever was waiting outside was no innocent Christmas gift. I slowly approached the door, careful not to make the floorboards creak. With each step, I felt the cold from the porch seeping through the cracks, chilling my ankles. I leaned in, listening. Nothing. Not a breath. Not a whisper. They were gone. And yet, the dread didn't leave with them. I placed my ear against the wood. Still silence. It was the kind of silence that doesn't calm you, it warns you. I straightened up and exhaled shakily, resisting the urge to unlock the door just to see the box. Curiosity can be deadly when mixed with fear. I walked toward the living room window and gently pulled back the curtain just a sliver. There it was, sitting in the dim porch light, a small box wrapped in red paper and tied with that crooked ribbon. It looked so harmless, almost festive, as if it belonged in a holiday commercial. But knowing what I knew now, it felt like a threat disguised in glitter. My stomach churned. Why would someone go to such lengths to deliver a gift I was warned not to touch? What could they possibly gain from me opening it? My mind raced through possibilities, each one worse than the last. Maybe it was something humiliating, a cruel prank meant to embarrass me. Or something dangerous, something they assumed an elderly woman wouldn't question. Maybe it wasn't about the contents at all. Maybe the act of opening it was the trap. The thought made my hands tremble. I backed away from the window, needing distance. The walls felt too close, the air too still. I whispered to myself, not tonight. They won't trick me tonight. I sat down at the kitchen table again, but this time I didn't touch my tea. I simply stared at the phone, half expecting another message from the unknown number. But the screen remained dark. I realized something unsettling. The caller hadn't just been warning me, they had been trying to buy me time. Buy me safety, which meant the danger wasn't over. It was evolving, waiting. And the box was only the beginning. I folded my trembling hands and tried to steady my breathing, replaying every detail of the night in my mind, seeking patterns I might have missed. Then a new sound cut through the silence, something faint but distinct. A soft scrape. Not from the porch this time, but from the side of the house. My blood turned cold. Someone was still outside. Someone who hadn't left with my daughter-in-law and her friends. I stood up slowly, every nerve screaming, and reached for the hallway light switch. But before I could turn it on, I heard it again, closer, slower, deliberate. Someone was moving around my house in the dark, and they weren't trying to hide anymore. The scraping sound sent a jolt through my entire body. It wasn't loud, but it was intentional, slow, dragging, almost as if someone were tracing their fingers or an object along the outside wall. I held my breath, straining to identify the direction. My house had always been a safe space, a quiet place filled with memories. But tonight, it felt like the walls were made of paper, thin enough for danger to slip through. I pressed my palm against the wall as if I could feel the presence on the other side, my skin prickling with fear. The sound moved toward the kitchen window. I froze. The curtains were closed, but thin enough that shadows could pass through if someone stood close. I backed up slowly, each step careful, as though the floor might betray me with a creak. I reached for the light switch, but stopped myself at the last second. Turning it on would reveal my exact position to whoever was outside. Instead, I remained in the dim glow of the hallway, breathing quietly, listening. My heart felt like it was beating in my throat. Just then, the scraping stopped, and a soft tap replaced it. A tap on the glass. Gentle. Too gentle. It was the kind of tap you use when you want someone's attention but not their neighbors. I clapped my hand over my mouth, stifling a gasp. I could hear faint breathing through the window, shallow and uneven. Someone was standing right there, inches away. I whispered a prayer under my breath, something I hadn't done in years. The air grew colder, heavier, as though the house itself sensed the danger lurking outside. I retreated deeper into the hallway when suddenly my phone buzzed in my pocket. The vibration nearly made me jump. My fingers shook as I pulled it out. A new message from the unknown number. Do not go near the windows. They're looking for movement. My knees weakened. My lungs burned, desperate for air. Whoever was outside wasn't random. They knew something. They were searching. And someone out there knew exactly what they were doing. My mind raced. Was the caller watching from somewhere? Or were they closer than I thought? I crouched behind the hallway wall, pressing myself into the shadows. My ears strained to catch every sound. The tapping moved again, this time toward the side door, the one I rarely used. Then, another noise, the soft, metallic jiggle of a doorknob being tested. Not forcefully,
Carefully.
like someone checking for weaknesses. The sound sent a shockwave of panic through me. I clutched the phone to my chest and squeezed my eyes shut. Please, I whispered, please just go away. But whoever was outside had no intention of leaving. Then, as suddenly as it started, the jiggling stopped. The night fell silent, thick and suffocating. Not a single footstep. Not a whisper. Nothing. The stillness was worse than the noise because it meant one thing. They were waiting, watching, planning their next move. I stayed hidden, breathing in shallow, silent gasps, wondering who they were and whether this dark Christmas nightmare had only just begun. The sudden silence outside was almost unbearable. I stayed pressed against the hallway wall, listening so hard my ears ached. Every instinct inside me screamed that the danger hadn't passed. It had simply changed shape. Silence can be a hiding place, and whoever was outside had slipped into it effortlessly. I felt my throat tighten as I imagined a shadow standing perfectly still just beyond the door, waiting for the perfect moment to move again. My breath came out in small, shaky puffs that sounded far too loud in the quiet house. Minutes felt like hours. I tried to count them to calm myself. 1 breath, 2 breaths, 3. But the panic kept creeping back into my chest like icy water. I wanted to call someone for help, but who? My son clearly wasn't on my side tonight. And calling the police without concrete evidence would only make me look unstable. My daughter-in-law would love that. I could practically hear her voice. She's confused, officer. She gets paranoid at night. They would dismiss me before even checking the backyard. The thought alone made my stomach turn. I stood up slowly, careful not to make a sound, and moved to the far end of the hallway where the old wooden dresser stood. I pulled open one of the drawers and took out a flashlight, small, but bright enough to blind someone temporarily. I wasn't foolish enough to turn it on yet, but having it in my hand made me feel less defenseless. I whispered to myself, "You're not weak, Evelyn. Not tonight." The words steadied me. Age may slow the body, but it sharpens the intuition, and mine told me the night was far from over. Just when I thought maybe the danger had passed, a new sound drifted through the air, soft at first, almost like fabric brushing against wood. My entire body stiffened. The sound came from the back of the house this time, near the kitchen door. I felt my heart lurch. They weren't wandering randomly. They were circling,
Studying.
testing each point of entry, like someone who knew the layout too well. That realization sent a cold tremor through me. Whoever was outside wasn't guessing. They knew my house. I stepped backward into the living room, my eyes darting to every shadow, every corner. The darkness felt alive, shifting with my fear. Another sound, a slow exhale, barely audible, drifted from outside the back window.
It wasn't me.
It wasn't the wind. Someone was standing close enough for their breath to fog the glass. My hand tightened around the flashlight instinctively. My pulse raced so fast I felt faint. I crouched behind the sofa, forcing myself to stay silent even as terror pressed against my ribs like a tightening vice. Then my phone lit up again, glowing like a lifeline in the dim room. Another message from the unknown number. They're not alone. Do not let them inside. Whatever happens, stay away from the doors. My hands trembled as I read it. They're not alone. So there were more than one. maybe two, maybe more. And they weren't just wandering around, they were coordinating, waiting.
Positioning themselves.
I covered my mouth with both hands to keep from making a sound. That was the moment I understood. Tonight wasn't about abandonment. Tonight I was prey. As I crouched behind the sofa, clutching the flashlight like a lifeline, a realization began to ripple through my mind, slow at first, then sharp as glass. Everything about tonight felt wrong. The forced sweetness, the rushed gift, the anonymous warnings, the circling figures outside. None of this matched a simple act of cruelty. It was bigger than a petty daughter-in-law trying to ruin my Christmas. This felt orchestrated, coordinated,
Planned.
and suddenly, a frightening thought struck me. Maybe they weren't trying to leave me behind. Maybe they were trying to get me out of the house for a reason. I sat there trembling, replaying every moment of the day. My daughter-in-law had been unusually insistent that I leave the house tonight. She didn't just want me excluded, she wanted me gone. Meet us later, she had said. We don't know if there will be space in the car. It wasn't about humiliation. It wasn't about inconvenience. It was about removing me from here. My pulse quickened as the pieces slid into place. What if the box wasn't meant to harm me directly? What if it was meant to distract me or lure me outside so they could do something inside my home? The scraping around the walls suddenly made horrible sense. They weren't just trying to frighten me. They were checking windows, doors, entry points, making sure I was alone and vulnerable. And the message from the unknown caller, don't let them inside. I pressed my back harder against the sofa, feeling my breath catch in my throat. The danger wasn't on my doorstep, it was in the intention behind tonight. They wanted access. But to what? My possessions? My documents? Something hidden? My mind raced through possibilities. Then it hit me, the will. My husband's old will. The one safely stored in the wooden chest upstairs. No one knew about it except me. Not even my son. Not officially, at least. My husband had always distrusted my daughter-in-law, calling her hungry for what she hasn't earned. His will protected me, the house, and everything we built together. But last month I noticed my daughter-in-law asking too many questions about family assets and inheritance rights. I brushed it off then. But now it all made sense. They wanted me away from the house, so they could search it. A wave of betrayal washed over me, so strong I felt faint. My own son, did he know? Or was he being dragged along blindly, manipulated by the woman he married? I felt a tear slip down my cheek. Not from fear this time, but heartbreak. I whispered, "Oh, Daniel, what have they dragged you into?" I pressed a trembling hand to my mouth. The cruelty wasn't the part that hurt me the most. It was the idea that the boy I raised with love could be entangled in something that put me at risk. Something that threatened my home, my safety, my life. Just then, footsteps sounded again, this time near the back door. Firm.
Confident.
Not searching anymore.
Deciding.
Positioning. And in the faint glow from the street lamp outside, I saw a shadow move across the window. Not rushed. Not nervous. Purposeful. The kind of movement made by someone who was ready to act. My heart thudded painfully. The truth was now undeniable. Tonight wasn't about abandoning me. Tonight was about taking something from me. And if I didn't figure out how to protect myself, they might take far more than I was willing to lose. For several seconds, I couldn't move. I stared at the shadow outside the window, my breath trapped somewhere between my lungs and my throat. But then something else caught my attention. Something subtle, small, but unmistakably wrong. A faint creak behind me. Inside. My blood ran cold. The scraping earlier had been outside, circling the house, testing the walls. But this sound came from the floorboards near the back hallway. I froze, every muscle locking in place. Had someone already gotten in while I was distracted by the noise outside? I held my breath, listening. For a moment, I thought maybe it was the house settling from the cold. But then the sound came again, another soft, deliberate creak. Not random. Not accidental.
Slow.
Careful. Someone walking, trying not to be noticed. A chill ran down my spine so sharp, I almost gasped out loud. My mind flashed back to the unknown caller's warning. They're not alone. I had assumed they meant multiple people outside. But now the meaning twisted into something far more terrifying. What if one of them was already inside my home? I pressed my back harder against the sofa, gripping the flashlight until my fingers hurt. My ears strained to track the sound. The footsteps were slow, deliberate, almost surveying the place. Not rushing, not panicking. Someone confident enough to move with purpose. My heart pounded so violently, I feared they could hear it from the hallway. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my breathing. I whispered silently to myself, "Stay calm, Evelyn.
Stay still.
Listen." It was the only thing I could control. Stillness. Silence. Then, faintly, I heard a new sound, fabric brushing lightly against the wall. I squeezed my eyes shut, fighting the urge to panic. Whoever was inside was close. Too close. And they weren't searching drawers or cabinets. They were moving slowly, like someone waiting for the right moment to catch a person off guard. I forced myself not to think of the worst possibilities, but they crashed through my mind anyway. If they wanted the will, they might try to corner me until I told them where it was. Or, worse, remove me entirely so no one could oppose their claim. My throat tightened. I realized something even more sinister. The people outside, they weren't trying to get in. They were making noise to keep me distracted, focused outward, while one of them slipped inside through the old window in the laundry room. The window I always meant to fix but never did. My heart clenched with regret and fear. They had planned this. Coordinated it. The whole night was a setup to isolate me and strip me of the home my husband and I built together. And that meant the person inside wasn't just a threat. They had a mission. The footsteps grew closer, one slow step at a time. I could see the dim silhouette approaching the corner of the hallway, stretching along the floor like a dark stain. My palms were slick with sweat. I tightened my grip on the flashlight, ready to swing it if I had to. At my age, I couldn't fight much, but I could fight enough. I steadied my breath and crouched lower, waiting for the intruder to reveal themselves. And just when the shadow neared the edge of the wall, a soft, trembling voice whispered from the darkness of my own home. "Evelyn, don't scream." The whisper froze my blood. I stayed crouched behind the sofa, my heart slamming so hard I thought it might burst from my chest. The voice was close, too close, coming from just beyond the hallway corner. My grip on the flashlight tightened until my knuckles turned white. I forced myself not to scream, not to move, not to reveal the panic clawing up my throat. Fear makes you sloppy, and sloppy gets you hurt. I needed clarity. I needed to know who or what was inside my house. "Evelyn, please," the voice whispered again, shaky, hesitant, almost pleading. That tone didn't match the cold, calculated footsteps I had heard before. It didn't sound triumphant or aggressive. It sounded like someone terrified. Someone hiding. Slowly, painfully slow, I rose just enough to peek over the back of the sofa. The hallway was dim, lit only by the weak glow of a distant street lamp filtering through the curtained window. A shadow stood there, trembling slightly. Not advancing. Not attacking. Waiting. I held my breath and finally managed to say, in a cracked whisper, "Who's there?" Silence followed, thick and heavy, like the house paused with me. Then, hesitantly, the figure stepped forward into a sliver of light. My eyes widened. It wasn't one of my daughter-in-law's friends. It wasn't a stranger. It was a young woman I recognized only vaguely, someone I'd seen once or twice, lingering behind my daughter-in-law like a forgotten accessory. Pale, anxious, with shaking hands and eyes wide with fear. She wasn't here to harm me. She was running from something. She lifted her hands, palms out, as if surrendering. "I'm not here to hurt you," she said, voice trembling. "I swear. I tried to warn you." My pulse spiked. It was her, the one who sent the messages. The one who called. She wasn't a mysterious outsider. She was part of the group. She swallowed hard, her voice cracking. "They don't know I'm in here. I left the car while they were distracted." Her eyes darted toward the door, full of panic. "You have to listen. You're in danger. Real danger." My breath trembled. Why? I asked, stepping out from behind the sofa, but keeping a safe distance. Her eyes glistened with guilt. Because your daughter-in-law, she planned tonight. Every detail. She told everyone you were going to ruin things if you stayed home. I felt my stomach twist painfully. Ruin what? She hesitated, then whispered, her chance to take everything before anyone notices. Her words pierced through me like ice. So it was true. The inheritance. The house. The will. Tonight wasn't an act of cruelty. It was an act of desperation. But the young woman wasn't finished. She stepped closer, fear radiating off her like cold air. She knows about the will, she whispered. And she's convinced you're hiding something important. Something she needs before your lawyer files the final papers. My chest tightened. How on earth did she know about the legal papers? Only my late husband, and I knew the timeline. Unless someone had been listening, watching, manipulating.
My heart sank.
My daughter-in-law wasn't just cruel. She was dangerous. And she wasn't working alone. Before I could respond, a sudden pounding shook the front door. Loud, violent, furious. The young woman flinched, terror filling her eyes. They noticed I'm gone, she whispered, her voice breaking. They know I came inside. Another bang echoed through the house. My breath caught. The danger outside was no longer creeping. It was knocking, demanding entry. And whatever waited behind that door was far more prepared than I was. The pounding on the door grew louder, angrier, each hit shaking the frame as if they intended to break it open. The young woman beside me jumped with every blow, her breathing shallow and panicked. I grabbed her arm and whispered, "Back room."
Now.
We hurried down the hallway, careful but fast, keeping to the shadows. As we passed the living room, another crash thundered through the house. Someone trying the back door now. They weren't searching anymore. They were trying to force their way in. My heart pounded so violently that I could feel it in my fingertips. We slipped into the small storage room near the stairs and shut the door silently. The young woman pressed her back against the wall, hands shaking. I didn't know it would get this far, she whispered, tears running down her cheeks. She said it was just a joke, that they just needed you distracted while they searched. But then she said, she choked on the rest. I leaned in closer. What did she say? Her voice cracked. She said if you refused to help, they'd make you. A chill tore through me so deep I felt it in my bones. The house echoed with footsteps now, multiple sets, moving fast, opening doors, slamming drawers. They were searching every room. My stomach twisted as I imagined them tearing apart the home I built over decades. Then the voice I feared most cut through the chaos, sharp, furious, unfiltered. My daughter-in-law. Find her, she screamed. She must have it. I know she does. The venom in her voice wasn't just anger. It was desperation. The kind a person feels when everything is slipping away and they're ready to destroy anything in their path. The young woman grabbed my hand. She's not just after the will, she whispered. There's something else. My heart lurched. What? She swallowed hard. Your husband's second document. The one he hid, the one proving the fraud she committed at the clinic 2 years ago. My breath stopped. How do you know about that? She wiped her tears. I worked there. I saw what she did.
I didn't speak up back then.
I was scared. But your husband did. He filed it quietly so your son wouldn't know. She found out last month. And now she thinks you're the only person who knows where it is. The truth hit me with the force of a falling tree. My daughter-in-law wasn't trying to steal my house. She was fighting for her future, because that document could destroy her marriage, her career, her freedom. The inheritance was only part of it. She needed the evidence gone.
Permanently.
And if she believed I was the only thing standing between her and total ruin, then the danger tonight was far darker than I ever imagined. A tear slid down my cheek as I whispered. So she planned this. Christmas. The friends.
The car.
Everything. The young woman nodded miserably. She said tonight was the only night no one would suspect anything. A sudden crash shattered the silence, glass breaking, Footsteps rushing toward the back hallway. They were close. Too close. I clenched my jaw, wiped my tears, and looked around the small storage room until my eyes landed on a heavy wooden box, my husband's. Inside it was the document she feared. I lifted it, clutching it to my chest. If she wants this, I whispered, she'll have to face the truth. I stepped toward the door, determination rising like fire in my chest. But before I could turn the knob, red and blue lights flashed through the cracks of the boarded window. Sirens. Tires skidding.
Shouts.
Someone outside yelled, "Police! Stay where you are." The young woman gasped. You called them?" I shook my head slowly. "No," she stared at me, confused. Then, from outside, I heard a voice, familiar, trembling, breaking with guilt. "My son. My mom's inside. Please, help her." My knees went weak. The weight of the night washed over me as officers burst through the door, shouting commands. My daughter-in-law screamed somewhere deeper in the house. And for the first time in hours, I finally breathed. Christmas didn't bring joy this year. It brought truth. And sometimes, truth is the only gift strong enough to save a life.